Welcome to the Body Peace Podcast, formerly known as Her Story on a Plate. This podcast has always been a space for deep, nuanced conversations about food, body image, and the stories our bodies carry. But as conversations have grown, so has our mission.
That's why this is now the Body Peace Podcast, a name that reflects what we're truly here for, helping you step off the battlefield with your body and move toward more compassion, connection, and ease.
Each episode will bring real, honest dialogue with your hosts, me, I'm Jennie Kramer.
And me, Nina Manolson. We'll also be joined by guests whose personal stories and professional wisdom offer new ways of thinking, feeling, and being in your body.
We're so glad you're here. Welcome to the Body Peace Podcast.
Welcome, welcome. We are delighted to have Kim with us today. Dr. Kim Daniels is a clinical psychologist with over 20 years of experience working with individuals struggling with eating disorders and disordered eating. She's a certified intuitive eating counselor and integrates IFS, internal family systems therapy, into her practice to help clients make peace with food and respect their bodies. She also has her very own podcast called the Emotional Eating and Everything Else podcast. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. And I love the way you said the title of the podcast. You really emphasize the and everything, because that's a huge everything, right?
Yes, it could keep you on the air for the next 13 years, yes. We like to start off by asking our guests, what brought you to this work? It's not easy work, and it's soulful. What brought you to this?
When people ask me that question, I always say, many people come to this work with their own histories of their own, perhaps eating disorder or, really, trauma history related to food in their body, something like that. That's not really my experience. Absolutely have always been an emotional eater. Food has always been my thing. So I do get sort of the emotional eating piece. Has it ever been a full-blown eating disorder? No. But food, again, has always been kind of my go-to. I'm sure we'll get into internal family systems, so I'm going to speak in terms of parts, but I have parts that absolutely use food to reward me, to soothe me, things like that. And when I was applying to grad school, I had, finished my undergrad. I had a bachelor's degree in psychology. And when I was applying, I had worked briefly just doing office work at like a private practice in town. And I remember talking to one of the therapists there. And he was like, well, why do you want to be a therapist? Who do you want to work with? And I said, I just really want to work with women. I want to empower women. And I remember him saying, that's wonderful. That's great. But be an empowered woman. The best way to empower women is to be an empowered. Don't just talk about it, do it. And so that has always kind of stuck with me. And so really just focusing my practice, I mainly work with women, and just really, to me, and we kind of touched on this before we started recording, I could go into all the politics of all of this and how that impacts our relationship with food and our bodies. And that's always just been so fascinating to me and just so incredibly important to talk to women.
To really look at this whole confluence of food and being a woman and in our culture, let's look at it, because we tend to individualize it. Oh, this is my problem. So can you speak to what you're seeing and what's bubbled for you?
Yeah. Sort of even in terms of internal family systems, right? We talk about this concept of burdens, right? We have our own burdens that we're carrying, but we have these sort of what we call cultural burdens, right? Just like these beliefs, these inaccurate beliefs that gets passed down from person to person to person and generation to generation to generation. Cultural burden that we are all living under. The research that they did in Fiji years back that I'm sure you know about. It's as soon as they introduced American television into Fiji, eating disorders went through the roof.
And Kim, I want to highlight what you just said. Diet culture is a cultural burden. And I feel like we could all have it tattooed on our foreheads and written on our mirrors, because we as women need to hear that over and over so that we don't go, oh gosh, what's my problem?
Yes.
Where am I at fault? How did
Yes.
I go wrong? Wow,
Mm.
I blew it again. No, let me
Yeah.
just reiterate what you just said. Diet culture is a cultural burden. It's not just ours alone.
No, no, I could not have said that better myself, Nina. It really is a belief that it just gets passed down and regenerated. I mean, as we all know, it just keeps regenerating in different ways. I mean, certainly folks who have kind of looked into this, diet culture started in a racist culture and is built on that foundation. So it is creating this hierarchy of bodies. That's how it started. I always love to share the fact that the first Miss America pageant was in 1921, the year after women got the right to vote. That's not a consequence, right?
Wow.
That's not a consequence. That's not a coincidence, right?
Right.
So women get any little bit of power,
It may
And
be.
then they need to
boom.
smaller. Right. It's liberation. And then we had Twiggy, right?
Exactly.
Every time we
Yes.
get big presence, bring power, you better have
Yep.
a small body.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And I remember my very first semester of grad school going to a presentation on eating disorders, and the psychologist said, men go to the gym to get bigger, women go to the gym to get smaller. And it was like that very simple thing. I mean, that was in 1995 that I went to that, and it stuck with me for this long.
Interesting you say that, because I think one of the things that all three of us probably talk about with our own clients is about, it isn't even about body size. It's about just feeling strong in your body.
Yeah.
Strong is not a word that women are often comfortable using.
No,
Like
no.
we're borrowing it. You
Yeah,
can be
yeah.
strong in a million ways, but certainly to just feel strong in your body, whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jenny, I appreciate you bringing that up, because when I was younger, I mean, I was in a very, sort of straight sized body as a kid. But I was not, like, I look at my daughter and she's this tiny little thing. I was always, my body type is just more muscular. And so, back when it's like, I almost hate to say this out loud, but back when I was a cheerleader, like I have parts that are like, I can't believe I was ever a cheerleader. But back in like elementary, middle school,
They were your happy parts.
They were my yes.
Your happy parts wanted to be heard.
Yes, and there wasn't much women's sports in my community back then. That's kind of all we had,
Yeah.
But I was always kind of on the bottom of the pyramid because I was one of the stronger ones, even though I was short. And I had parts that were really proud of that, but felt weird for being proud of that, right? Because everybody wanted to be the cute little one on top, But I was kind of like, well, but I think it's kind of cool being one of the people that's holding all this up. But that was not, that wasn't okay.
What a great way to look at that. Not to get off topic here, but I can't tell you how many folks, we've all treated and worked with who were at the top of that pyramid. And the minute they couldn't be at the top of the pyramid anymore, they made it mean something. And so did their world make it mean something. And it created a narrative that followed them for decades.
Yeah.
That they were now no longer small enough, good enough, excellent enough.
Yeah.
And it really just carries with them forever. So it's just fascinating what happens in those settings.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting what's happening now. Like there's some positive change. There's a lot of not so positive changes around food and body and the expectations. But this last season's Dancing with the Stars, Ilana Mayer, who is an Olympian rugby player, who is a woman of stature. She is a freaking tank. She is so strong. And there she is being decked out in all the like crazy Dancing with the Stars, slinky things.
Yeah.
And really, in real time, redefining femininity for our culture, for those people who are tuning in, and not just tuning into the show because being that she's in the era that she's in, she's gone TikTok viral, right?
Yeah.
And so the whole world is seeing this woman who is massively strong, like just incredible, athlete.
Yeah.
I hope it creates a very very different narrative for lots of
I hope
young
so.
I
really
hope so.
yeah. Yeah.
I
So
know. I
let's
know.
talk
She's
about
incredible.
narratives for a second. Let's
Uh-huh.
talk about narratives in terms of how we change narratives and
Uh-huh.
what influences what, how our own narrative
Uh-huh.
influences our
Mhm.
eating disorders or disordered eating.
So and then I think that brings us actually that question, Nina, brings us right into this idea of internal family systems or IFS as
Yes.
calling it, right?
Yeah.
Because and maybe Kim, you can address this, since this is really your area of expertise, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
the narrative that actually starts to create and generate some of those parts.
Yeah. And so, just brief little intro on what IFS is. So IFS, like I love to sort of explain IFS as like, have you seen the movie Inside Out? Right. Like most of us have seen that movie. And so that is a great little snapshot of, I call it like a watered down version of IFS. The main character has like these 5 little parts that make up, her personality. And each part has a role that they play in her system. Right. So IFS believes that we have this kind of a whole internal cast of characters, all that have different roles, in our system. And so I think one of the things that to me IFS is incredibly helpful with is that a lot of people say, well, I know it up here, like pointing to my brain, but I don't feel it in here, like pointing to my heart, right? So I know that diet culture is bad up here, but in here, I'm still kind of living with that. Like I'm still buying into it and I can't let it go. And to me, this is where IFS is incredibly helpful because our parts have taken in this message at a very, very deep level, like really from day one and even prior, for some people. Like if you are, we kind of know, and not that I can speak to any of this hardly at all, but like the whole epigenetics, research, kind of showing that, even trauma is passed down through genes and things like that.
I couldn't agree more. And that's not to put pressure on mothers who are carrying their fetuses. It's really also about that there's this environment that, a baby is born into and is grown into, and some of it is passed down, we'll say
Absolutely.
genetically,
Yep.
but also because we embody the thoughts and behaviors of everything around us, and most specifically our caregivers or the lack thereof.
That's right.
Those we attach to, those we never got to attach to. So that's even just coming out of the gate.
Coming out of the gate. Yes, exactly. And there's no parent who can be 100% responsive to a kid. It's not possible, right? There's no malice with that. There's no, even the best of caregivers is not going to be, as soon as the baby's crying, as soon as they're hungry, as soon as it's just not possible. So it makes total sense that we have parts that can pop up very young who are experiencing, food scarcity, neglect, whatever, or at least, kind of having that experience. But certainly, and our caretakers are also carrying the burden of diet culture. Yeah, through no fault of their own. They didn't ask for it. We didn't ask for it. None of those things. But, so all of this starts really, really early. And our parts take in these messages, again, even from our culture. I think, they did research like decades ago. And there's been more research since, but like, I think it starts at age, I want to say either 3 or 5 of kids. If they're shown pictures of kids with maybe a child with glasses and a child who is an amputee, a child who's blind, a child who's in a large body, and who do you not want to be friends with? And more often than not, it's the child in the large body, right? We learn that incredibly, incredibly young. Or you've been told, your body's too big, it needs to change, it needs again, it's like best case scenario, you're just getting it from our culture, but that's still a terrible case scenario, right?
And so then it makes sense, right, that there are going to be parts of us
Yeah.
that have to come forth, right?
Yeah.
Either, and I'll let you explain the depth of this, right? But parts of us that need to come forth almost in response to how we perceive our world.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the way we fit in. This is the way we're acceptable. Right. So with IFS, we really talk about, we have parts that are protective parts, who are protecting parts that are what we call exiles. And those exiles are the ones that are really carrying what I call like the kind of the really heavy stuff, like the, feelings of shame, feelings of, grief, beliefs of I'm not good enough. We all have parts that are carrying that based on our experiences. And
I want to talk about this word you used, which is exiles, right?
yes,
Because if you're not familiar with internal family systems or IFS, it sounds harsh. Like who's being thrown off the island, right?
Right.
So can you explain a bit what you mean, by the terminology, the part that is an exile?
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that. Dick Schwartz is the psychologist who founded IFS. I'm not sure why he uses that term, except that what happens is we have parts, and exiles tend to be young parts because we're more easily traumatized when we're young. And if, so say you have a part that is carrying a lot of shame, if that's the part that's kind of running the show in through the course of your life, life is going to be hard, right? When we're leading with shame, when we're leading with I'm not good enough, when we're leading with, grief, life is really hard. So our system, in order to just keep going, kind of tries to, exile is a harsh word, but tries to kind of push that part kind of down, so that it doesn't get hurt again, right? So that it doesn't take over the system. Because we're not making our best decisions when we're coming from a place of shame and I'm not good enough, right? It's hard to be effective in life when we're coming from that place. So our system is kind of like, we got to lock these parts away, and try to keep them as happy and kind of quiet as we can in order to just keep going. Yeah.
One of the ways that I like to think about it is just what you say, lock it away. Like the parts that we'd be like, you know what? You go in the cabinet, you go in like a closet in our room where we're putting stuff and we're like, I don't want to deal with this. Nope. In the closet, in the closet, in the closet. But then it takes some effort to keep that closet door shut.
Exactly.
And so then what do we do to keep that door shut? Oh, food is a really great way to keep that door shut and to not hear the pounding of the parts that are inside going, hello, I'm still here. And we're like, no. And then suddenly people open the closet and they're like, oh my gosh, like it's spilling out. It's so much.
And Kim, you used a term that I think we can't jump over, which is that it's also to push it down, right? Just the metaphor of that.
Yes.
When you think of the literal meaning of pushing it down, right? It sort of starts to describe either emotional eating or the eating that leads up to even purging, right? It's so visceral. And yet it becomes a way to survive. And that's the point, right? That there's compassion and there's humanity about the fact that we all do what we can to survive. And the idea of getting into a therapeutic setting where you can start to parse the parts and start to really understand them fascinates me, because I know, and maybe you could speak to this, I know that in the clinical setting, it's not even just this intellectual understanding of them, because that's one part, but it's also interacting with them. Can you speak to that again?
Yes, absolutely. And and again, that's kind of, what we were kind of talking about before in terms of there's this sort of intellectual understanding of maybe, I'm an emotional eater and I know I eat when I'm stressed, right? But that's only going to take you so far. And that's, again, those are parts that are like, oh, now I understand what it is. But that's again, it's only going to take you so far. So there's a lot of ways that we kind of work in IFS. There's kind of a lot of things going on at the same time. But so one of the things is getting to know, we all have these parts. So we're getting to know the part maybe that turns to food for emotional reasons. And the whole point of that is those are protector parts that are using the food are the protector parts, and they're protecting these exiled parts. And Nina, what you were saying about knocking on the door is exactly right. The way that exiles were described to me is like, it's kind of like when you're trying to keep beach balls underwater, right? You can do it, but they're always trying to pop up, and it's always effort to keep them down, right? So those are our exiles. They want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be validated. But our system is like, that's too dangerous, that's too scary. We got to keep them quiet, keep them in that closet. But in addition to, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is, in addition to parts, IFS believes that we all have this core self. And the self is so when Dick Schwartz was sort of developing the model, he was actually working with clients diagnosed with bulimia when he started developing the model. And he, started noticing them talking about parts. Part of me wants to stop this, but part of me doesn't. And so, he really started playing around with that. And then he started noticing that clients, when he would say, hey, let's get curious about that part, they would say, I don't think that's a part. I feel like that's me. And so he developed this whole concept of like, we all have this core self, and our core self is compassionate and curious, and confident and calm. We have all these 8 C's that we use to describe that.
You ever get clients who come in and say, what if my core is damaged?
Yes. That's a great question.
Either because of trauma, or because I think I was born that way. I'm just weird. I'm different than others, or some such thing.
Yeah. People believe that, or I don't have a self. And for some people, not to get too in the weeds with this, but our self can also be exiled. Our self can also be kind of shoved in a closet by our system, because the self is sort of a, again, it's compassion. And if you grow up in a system where compassion is absolutely dangerous, your system can also exile yourself again.
It's something that I also want to add in. This is one of the reasons, there are many reasons, but this is one of the reasons why you want to work with somebody who is qualified in this work, right? Somebody like you, Kim, or Jennie, or me, that can hold you and can actually model self when you can't.
That's right. You're absolutely right. We start off as the self in the room, as we say with our clients, right? So, when people come in, I don't have a self, I've never experienced it, and some people haven't really experienced self. And so we have ways of helping them to do that. Like, the theory is that self cannot be damaged. And I wholeheartedly buy into that. I promise you're going to see that you have a self in there, and it is not damaged.
But that's the curiosity, right? Because if one really feels like, I don't have a self, I don't have a core anymore. I might have had it at one time. I don't know what it is, and I don't even think it's there anymore, right? That's camouflage. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
So if you really say to yourself, I can't tell you how many times we all hear, I've done it all. I've done everything. I've been in therapy for decades. I've been on every diet on the planet. This is my last stop. Okay, good stop. It's my last one, right? And you made a good choice. And I'm not even sure really this is just ever going to change. Okay, if you say so, right? And that's not the core speaking. That's the point. That's not the self that's speaking. Those are parts that have developed over time, kind of without our consent. That's the point. The parts develop just because they develop.
Right. And somebody needs to do it. Right. Somebody needs to do it. Right. And to your point, like, I get that too. Like, I've been in and out of therapy, nothing has worked. So it is absolutely understandable that somebody might be coming in with parts going, like, this is going to do me any good. What's different about this?
I think it has to be said, there is still, I don't know if you agree with this, there's still a behavioral piece that has to do with what I'm going to call habit. In other words, you've done things a certain way in response to the roles of these parts, we'll say, right? So you've done things a certain way, maybe for decades. And now you've, of course, right? And now you come up with these extraordinary insights and different ways of viewing yourself and seeing yourself and feeling about yourself. And there are these behaviors that you've been doing, right? There, again, there's a gentleness that's necessary to now look at them curiously and differently and say, do these even work anymore?
Right.
And can I do something else? Can I be something else? Yeah.
But also to have that conversation in collaboration with self. So, okay, if you don't, right? If with self, with the different parts that go, no, but this really worked for me. It really worked for me every time I was lonely at night to eat a box of cookies. That worked. And now self is going, well, I don't know, does it? And there's that part that was lonely. Well, I don't know. It did. Okay, well, let's brainstorm. What else if you're feeling lonely? How else can we support you, lonely part?
Right.
Right.
And if you like, okay, so let's say you have a part that you have an exile part that's carrying immense shame. And one way of dealing with it, and they have a protector part that uses food to just kind of numb that out, right? If we can work with that exile part to let go of shame, that protector part doesn't have to jump in anymore because there's nobody getting triggered. At the end of the day, that's what we're going for, is getting to the exiles to let go of what they're carrying. And then those protector parts don't have to do that job anymore because there's nothing to protect.
Or sometimes I'm in a crowd and I'm still lonely. Sometimes I'm with a bunch of friends and I might still feel lonely. And so that's a bit harder work, right? To really understand what that feeling is, how old it is, how used to it you are almost, right?
So again, it's like IFS is kind of working in a few different ways all at the same time. You know, it's working with those protector parts to go, hey, let's really kind of look at this, but it's also then getting under that to work with the exile. If I let that go, then
is it accurate to say that there is also what goes with the parts are our stories about the parts and our stories about events in our lives and things that have happened? Because I'm imagining, as you really get into this work, if you are someone who has suffered, some level of trauma, right? It's not to change your version of it. You are the one that happened to, you understand it the way you do, you experienced it the way you do, your body experienced it the way you experienced it, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. It really is about when we get to meeting those exiles who are the ones who really are carrying the burdens of whatever trauma. And that could be the memories, that could be beliefs that they've taken on about themselves because of the trauma or just the emotions they're still carrying. I mean, I really feel like the most important thing is for self to be witnessing that. I mean, our exiles want to be heard and to just tell their story. And like a huge, huge piece of healing in that whole process is just, to have that connection with self and to have the client's self just be going, yeah, that was terrible. That was terrible.
And Kim, what you're saying is so important because people think, well, I'm going to come to therapy and I'm going to tell my stories again to the therapist. And that's not the point, right? The point is for us to hear it ourselves, for ourselves to hear it, right? So that there's a integration and an understanding and that the compassion can flow within ourselves, right?
That's exactly right.
As a therapist, we can hold that space, but ultimately we want our clients to be able to embody that compassion and for their selves to do the heavy lifting.
Reminds me of some of the older models like psychodrama and Gestalt therapy, right? Because you're in those models, right? Your self witnesses the conversation. The conversation isn't with yourself. The conversation is with perhaps another in your life, alive or dead, right? So, but that's the difference. I think it's just a brilliant model. Yeah.
Jennie, what you were saying earlier about clients who come in, it's like, I've done this a million times, and one of the messages that I like to give is like, we're not here to rehash all of this again, right? Because inevitably there's a part that says, I don't want to talk about all that stuff anymore. I've already talked about that so many times, right? And I always say, like, your parts don't have to tell me anything. That's to Nina, to your point, that's not really the goal here. Your parts need yourself to know what happened and to hear what happened and to just sit with that and hold that space. You don't ever have to tell me any of the details if your parts don't want you to.
But I want to say something about that. Like Jennie, you said, this is my last stop. This is the last thing I'm doing. But often for women, food and body, food first, and then the relationship with body are the last stops. I'm sure you both have this in your practice, incredibly competent, capable, amazing women who have done so much work on themselves, done all the things, are very functional in their life. And they're like, why am I still having unwanted eating behavior and still hating my body? Yeah. And it does. The way we treat ourselves ends up being the last stop.
The sentence I often hear is, I'm so good at so many things.
Yes.
And it's just this one thing.
Just one thing. Just
right?
one little thing. Yeah. Never mind that it wraps up every single thing of their entire life. But that's okay. One thing. We're good. One thing. No
Right.
problem. Yeah.
So right. You're so right.
Okay. So, Kim, I want to ask you a question that is a sort of fun question around, based on the title of our podcast called Her Story on a Plate, which is, if you were to share a food dish that represents your food story or therapeutic philosophy, what would it be? I know, you take your time. What would it be? And why? This is very open-ended.
Oh, man.
Don't panic. We're not asking you to cook. It's okay. That would panic me. So, okay.
It's so, I'm actually really intrigued by the whole like parts palooza going on in my head right now, in terms of like the parts is like, what am I supposed to say? How am I supposed to make this sound like really smart? I had a part that immediately went, it's got to have chocolate in it somewhere. And I had a part that went, it's also got to have kale. So that sounds disgusting, doesn't it? So I would say, and I'm kind of, I'm going to borrow this a little bit from like a dietitian colleague. And I realized that I had parts that were still really holding on to what a meal should look like. And she was like, why don't you just make a little charcuterie board of something? And it was like, wait, what? That can be a dinner? You know? So that was like this which goes to, like, to me, that speaks so much about, again, just even the basics of how we look at food and what meals are supposed to look like and what is a breakfast food and a dinner food and all that kind of stuff that we have made meaning out of that we don't need to make meaning out of. Kind of a plate of a lot of different things. It would be very nourishing foods, and it would be like some mac and cheese, some comforting foods. It would be, there's a bakery in town that I absolutely love, and they tend to do like a different cheesecake
now you have to name
every
them
week
for people who are in your area.
Absolutely. Shout out to Taste by Spellbound in Connecticut. 3 locations. Yeah, they're fantastic. And they do like this, it's like a snickerdoodle cheesecake that is absolutely to die for. So that would be on there. So to me, like, one of the things that I always say to people is food still gets to be emotionally comforting to you. The goal here is not to never do this again, because that doesn't even make sense to me, right? Food is absolutely comforting. So we get to still have that. We just want to make sure that actually the parts that are using it to help other parts, like we were talking about the loneliness, it's kind of missing the boat in some ways, right? Food is not going to help loneliness necessarily.
I love what you said. You know, just to use the metaphor, the idea of a charcuterie board, right?
Yeah.
It's about variety.
There you go.
It really is. And, you know, I am confident there are some people that will be listening to this podcast and say, can you believe these 3 chicks are just naming all of the food? Don't they realize it's going to trigger us and all that? Don't let it. Don't let it. Don't let it. Yeah. It's just about naming the foods that have some meaning.
Yeah.
And putting it out there. I mean, I appreciate the transparency of it, right? I mean, that's the idea. They don't represent who you are.
Right.
They represent just a part of you. I mean, that's the point.
Right. And it's okay for parts to still love food. Yeah.
And Kim, it's the IFS charcuterie board. because you literally did that. Like my part wants this and another part wants this and another part wants that and another part wants this, right? And shouldn't that be a day of eating, right?
Yeah, there you go.
There's a part of me in the morning that absolutely needs a nutrient-dense meal because I do a lot of my work in the morning. And then there's a part of me somewhere in the day where it's like, do I get to party now? Like, where's my treat? Right? So like I love that idea of a parts charcuterie board.
I love that.
And
yeah.
how do we bring that into our life in terms of our relationship with food that gives us permission to feed our different parts on many levels?
That's
Food,
right.
emotionally, time, energy, all of it.
All of it. Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Just going to say, it's important to say that there's a part that also moralizes about food, right?
Totally.
The part moralizing about food is listening to this and saying, well, how come they didn't mention carrots? Well, because carrots are on the board too.
Carrots can be on the board. Your board is going to look different than my board, right?
Right. And you want to just stay curious about that because you want to know, is that fear speaking? Is that fear speaking?
Right.
And that's the curiosity, I think.
Right. And going back to your point of that's a part that's moralizing food because it learned to moralize food.
Yeah.
Going back to the very beginning, like one of the things I like to say is none of this is authentic to us. None of this concern about our bodies and concern about food and concern about none of that's authentic to us. We learned all of that. Our parts learned all of that. And they can unlearn all of that because they're just trying to survive, right?
Yes.
But we can help them unlearn that.
I want to end right there. We can unlearn it. It is possible. It is doable. We can unlearn, we can heal, we can be in a positive and caring relationship with our body and our food. And Kim, thank you. Would you tell us how people can reach you?
Yeah. So my website is drkimdaniels.com. One of the great things about being a psychologist is that psychologists do have a national telehealth license now. So, and there's like 40 or 42 states have signed on board to this. So the good news is psychologists are not bound by state lines anymore. So I'm in Connecticut, but I can see people in most states all over the country, except for Massachusetts and New York, which are my neighbors. So that's really helpful. But but most other places, I can work with people outside of Connecticut. So that's a good thing. Cool. So all that information is on drkimdaniels.com. And as Nina said, the podcast is the Emotional Eating and Everything Else podcast, which talks a lot about IFS. So if any of this has piqued anybody's interest in terms of IFS, that's a place to learn more.
Well, Kim, I feel privileged that I got to meet you, while you were actually doing the training, and you're great at them, and we appreciate the contribution that you make to our field and to clients alike. And it's been a delight to have you, and thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, it's been an absolute delight. I feel like we could talk for another 5 hours about all of this, and it was a great conversation. Good. So thank you so much.
Good. Thank you, Kim.
We're so glad you joined us on this episode of Body Peace.
Stay connected as we continue exploring what it means to live in your body with more ease, trust, and care by subscribing to Body Peace on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen.
Be sure to visit us at bodypeacepodcast.com for special bonus content for those on our mailing list.